Hello and welcome to the Museum of the Unknowns. This is a place for showcasing the work of two people that were very important to me in my life, and work that is also very important to me, and that is Farlan and Noura Hardy. Farlan and Noura were husband and wife, and I was also wife of Farlan's second wife. So Farlan had two wives at the same time, which is polygamy, not bigamy, as some people seem to think. Bigamy obviously is illegal, not allowed, but polygamy, I as a second wife was a common law wife, so that is perfectly acceptable to the authorities. Farlan and Noura are both passed away. Noura passed away just last year, and Farlan passed away in 2001. And so they've left behind a wonderful body of work, but they are completely unknown. And I was visiting the V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum in London recently, and I was looking at I was in the jewellery section, the very sparkly jewellery section, and I was looking at a little brooch, a little fish brooch, that was very, very like some jewellery I made myself years and years ago. And I just got to thinking, I wonder why it is that some people's work ends up in the V&A and other people's work just gets lost and disappears and nobody ever gets to hear of it or gets to see it or hear it. I've been trying on and off for years to make some sort of inroads into the world with Farlan's work and Noura's work, but without any success. Very, very hard these days to get anywhere with work unless, you know somebody who's in the publishing field or in the art field or wherever, or to do so digitally, online. You generally need to have quite a large following of your own before you can kind of get anywhere, which I suppose is understandable. But for those of us that don't have large followings and don't know a lot of people, that's another avenue that's a little bit difficult. But anyway, I just, while I was at the V&A, I just thought, well, I had the idea for the Museum of the Unknowns, and I thought, well, why not just make it a YouTube channel. I never really considered YouTube. I'm not particularly technically or digitally or internetally minded, and I never, I've had sort of websites on and off throughout the years, but I never really thought too much about having a social media channel for the work. But anyway, while I was at the V&A, I suddenly thought, well, why not? And I thought of calling it the Museum of the Unknowns, which may not be the best title for something, but Farlan and Noura are at present spectacularly unknown. As I said, they have both passed away, and I may also be have not long for this world, as the saying goes. I have this serious cancer. It's at that stage 4, where it's no longer curable. It's quite advanced, and so it's I don't know. I may live for years, or the way I feel today, I could be gone by the end of the month. I don't feel so great today. But that's one of the reasons why I perhaps wanted to do this as just sort of one sort of maybe final effort to try and do something with Noura and Farlan's work, even though it may not come to much. At least it'll have a little presence out there in the world, albeit a very little one. But it'll be there, and which is better than nothing. You know, both Farlan and Noura were very, very talented, doesn't seem to quite the right word. They both had something, I think, a bit special to say, something a bit different. Farlan said it best in music, and Noura best in writing. And Farlan, his body of work that he left, his music, is mostly on, he recorded on a little fuzz deck, don't know if you call it a multi-track, but it was just a little one. I think I had done 2 tracks or maybe 4. And that's still where most of it is. I've managed to cobble together, with my lack of skills, I managed to cobble together a CD, but it's not the best quality of sound, but it's not bad either. At least it's you know, at least it's something. And Noura's writing, the book that I would most want, I think she would most want to be known for, is Stonebreaker, which is it's a huge book. It's about 600 pages, or 550, I can't remember. We self-published, so we've got we sold a few copies, but not very many, and we've got a few copies left. It unfortunately has a lot of spelling mistakes because I did not do a very good job of you know, editing and spell checking and all that. Did my best, but it's not great. But that is probably the book that I would most like people to read, and that she would probably most like people to read. She has other completed novels that she did many years ago in a completely different style to Stonebreaker. They're more very, very very poetic. And when she got a little bit of interest at one point many years ago from a lady at Collins, the publishers, but the lady at Collins said that it was, you know, the writing was like a diet of rich cream cakes, because it was very, very, well, as I said, very, very poetic, lots of very beautiful visual metaphors, and in the end Collins decided not to publish because they thought it was uncommercial, which it probably is, but nevertheless lovely, but not much plot, and some people do like a plot. Anyway, so both Farlan and Noura were painters as well. They both painted, and Farlan wrote as well. He wrote. He's left behind a very long, handwritten 4-volume, wild novel called The Wayward Way, and it started. Farlan was making me a box. He was decorating me a box. He was a decorative artist, and he was decorating me a box as an apology because we'd had an argument, and it was his fault. It wasn't, arguments weren't always his fault, but this one was. And he was making me a little, well, it was quite a big box, big sewing box, as an apology. And he was having a lot of difficulty, you know, as you do with your art. Sometimes your art goes smoothly, and sometimes, you know, it doesn't, and you run into all sorts of strange problems. Well, he ran into strange problems. I'm just doing that because I suddenly thought, I can't actually see because I'm not wearing my glasses. Just suddenly thought it looked a bit strange. Yeah, he was having problems, so real serious problems. And as a bit of light relief, he decided to write a little story about the problems he was having with decorating this box. And he wrote it in the style of a Victorian lady, and he called his readers his dear readers, as the Victorian ladies used to do. And anyway, that's how it started, and then it just went wild. It sort of, you know, don't even begin to know how to describe it, but it's hilarious. It's very, very funny. It's also very naughty. Some of it I probably wouldn't, I don't know, so in this day and age, whether it could see the light of day. But it's also, in some parts, it's very, mostly it's funny, I think, but some parts of it are very profound and very moving. Yeah, I was going to tell you something about Farlan there, but maybe I won't. Anyway, maybe I'll tell you another time. So, what else do I have to say? Yeah, Noura was a painter, as well as writing was her main thing. That was where it was all at for her. But she was a painter, and she was maybe more what you call a fine art painter. But she also did jewellery and sculpture, and she painted scarves, silk scarves, and she made things. So she was very inventive and, you know, uber talented, super talented, very, very special, lovely person. And yeah. So this is basically, I should just show you some work. This is what it's about. I don't know how many videos I've put up. I don't know. You know, I don't even know that I put this one up. But I'll try and I'll have to get my son to help me. You know, put the music. Oh, I should probably put the music video together, sort of. You know, so that it all works properly. And I will read you just for a beginning, for a start. I'll read you an extract from Stonebreaker, and we'll see how we go. Bye. The first thing I'm going to show you is two songs by Farlan. The first is called Backward Hours, which I think is a very beautiful title for a song, and it's also a very beautiful song. And the second one is called If You Have Lost It, and it has an animation going along with it that was made by my son Sebastian when he was about 12 or 13, not long after his dad had died. And that's very nice. So I hope that you'll enjoy them. The other thing I'm going to do is read an extract from Stonebreaker. Stonebreaker is quite an unusual book in that it's not. I mean, it has actually got a tremendous plot, multi-stranded plot that weaves together in a very fascinating and clever way. To me, I could never understand how she did it. You know, when she was writing it, she used to read bits to me, and I just could not see how she was going to bring all these plot strands together, but she did it. It's not it doesn't look along at a great pace. It's a very meditative book, so probably in order to enjoy it or to get the most out of it, it's best to put your expectations of what a book is, what a modern book is anyway, to the side, and expect a kind of slow burn. It is a meditative book. There's lots and lots of beautiful descriptions. They are all to the point, but some people don't like it. Some people just want the story to move along very, very quickly, and some people have become quite frustrated at the pace, and it's not just the pace. It's not just filling in with lots of random things random words to pad out a book. Everything has a point, even if it's not a plot-driven point. So to get the most of it, I would just maybe slightly alter your expectations and prepare for a meditative experience. So actually, this is Stonebreaker. This is my rather sort of moth-eaten copy. Can you see that? Stonebreaker, with the cover cover was designed also by my son Sebastian when he was quite young, and that was the self-published copy we did a number of years ago. So I don't know if it. I don't think I could start at the start at the front and read all the way through to the end. And it's such a strange book that I don't know that there's any particular place that's that would be any better to start than any other. So I just chose a random chapter. A lot of the early part of the book, the hero Tom spends a lot of time alone, and so a lot of what's happening are just his descriptions of his state, his changing state, his responses to things, quite a lot about shadows and light and sort of things that interest an artist. He becomes an artist. He doesn't start out as an artist. He starts out as a university student, Tom, and something happens to him. A strange event happens at the very beginning of the book, something unusual and a bit bizarre, and he doesn't understand it, but after that happens, his life sort of begins to unravel and change, and he has a terrible time. He ends up homeless, he ends up destitute, he ends up penniless, and with no friends and no family, and he's managed to kind of cobble himself together enough money to get a little bedsit, and he's living there. So the chapter that I'm going to read you, it starts with Tom on his own, just feeling his surroundings, having a little experience, having some memories, and then there's a knock on the door, and somebody appears, and it turns out to be one of the other main figures in the book. I won't tell you any more about it because I'll just read it to you, and you can make up your own mind what you think. Okay.
The good hours in the glass shows me myself, red rimmed ahead, pale faced, but not a clown. No, I'm just down amongst the last of the dream. The good hours, no, it's not nostalgia, it's not sweet and gentle, not mellow, like an old song you've grown to love. No, it's just me. Pale faced, bedroom died, but I'm not a clown. No, I'm just down amongst the last of the dreamers. The good hours in the glass, me, I don't know sorrow, no grief, I don't know despair. I can stare back at the sun and stand moved by the backward hours in the glass. Me will it laugh and break the backward hours. Red room died, pale faced, but not a clown. No, I'm just down amongst the last of the dreamers. If you have lost it, well, it's gone forever. until you find it again. But then when it's changed, it's a different shine. It plays in a different way. It's gone forever, and it might only be a day. You learn how to say goodbye, and the world goes flying about your own brow. Beneath upon your ears, and nothing is lost. Leave upon your countenance, leave upon your slow smile. In time before you, like so many worries. And you're so clever, you play chess with oranges up on a black wall. Because the stars moving house, think of yourself in the fourth person. And all the while, the way you goes, unravel your brow. Unravel your heart, unravel your heart.
Stonebreaker, Chapter 14. He had been out shopping at the cheapest supermarket, and on the way home on the bus he had noticed how those blue skies of summer were beginning to give way to cold and to rain, an early taste of the weather that would arrive in a few weeks. Good thing too, he thought, because the summer was his personal enemy, even though the warmth was welcome. He was looking forward to the winter, anticipating it as never before, thinking, I hope we have snow. It was almost a year since Shawlee. He kept thinking, I should go back for myself, and I promised Jim Rhodes, because where could he go with his quest? Where could he discover what the place was about, except at Shawlee? There was something keeping him away, and he thought it was probably fear. Going home, sitting beside his electric fire, he was still in his coat. It wasn't really cold yet, other people were still wearing their summer clothes, but it had been raining and the temperature had dropped. He was sitting in his armchair, and he could not be bothered to get up and put on the light. After half an hour, he got up and made a cup of tea in the half-light. He loved the way the light performed its stunt, its trick, this time of the evening. It was as if the shadows came out of the walls where they had been hiding all day, as if there were secret places, hiding places, and in the evening they came creeping. As the room became darker, he lit his candle. He had been using candles because he was worried about his electricity bill, and so saved on the light with candles, and he loved the light and found it an inspiration. He admired its flame, like a golden leaf, he thought. It never wavered, except its unique petal tip sometimes swayed this way and that, and it was for Tom like an entity. Tom, who had no other companion, a pure, regal and upright friend whose very silence was loquacious, as if the candle flame spoke, but spoke with its own spirituality, and showed him his room as being a cave, a secret place where visions might happen. Sleepily he watched his mesmerizing flame, and he began to remember something from way back. When could it have been? It was a long time ago, and at first he thought it was only a dream. His eyelids were heavy, but he did not want to shut out any of the sight of the candle, of the room. He did not want to waste this moment in sleep. Not a dream, he thought, and yawned. It was a long time ago, and it was a room, a living room, and there was a fire. His mother's house must be, because there had been a fire in the winter in the front room. It was quite a big house. They had bought it, so he had been told, when they were first married. Houses were cheaper to buy then. It was odd, after all the vagaries of his life, it had started out like that, in such a house owned by his family, as if he was someone with rights in the community, when he never seemed to really belong. There was a garden, must have been the back garden, but in the memory the curtains were open and he could just see the garden, because it was dark outside. The garden looked enormous, it looked special, a place where dragons might linger, and now he looked again at his pale candle flame speaking in its tongues of fire, and he remembered himself sitting on the floor. He must have been, he did not know how old, but he had not really been happy, but he was alone, and he liked the fire and the dark garden beyond the window. Then he remembered it so well he opened his eyes wide, as if that would make the remembering easier. He remembered the shadows on the walls, and he had a story, and what a story it was. It was a story he told himself, and he rather thought he might have written some of it down sometime. Yes, he thought, I had exercise books and I wrote it down, but he could not remember what had happened to them. The stories were probably not very coherent. It was an idle, rambling story about the shadows on the wall. That was it, there in the wall, while he sat in the evening beside the fire. Where was his mother, Luke, and Barbara? He could not remember. It was the back room. There was an old green sofa and an upright piano. But the walls now, they were light, white, or some colour very close. And in the firelight they had been gold, like deserts, and there had been a shadow on the wall that looked like a low skyline. And as he looked, he had seen distances in the wall, and he had seen a whole country in the shadows of the wall. And standing, he had seen his own shadow run tall and lean into the wall, and he had gestured, he had danced before the wall, as though it was the altar, and he was its only congregation and its priest. Because as he moved, so does his shadow, and his taller, longer, older shadow, his wise shadow that he knew was so much more than he was, like an older brother with a great knowledge, would wave towards him, and would run and run into his adventures in the world of the wall. And he, Tom, had a stick, and when he held it, the shadow warrior, shadow brother, had a spear, and he had a terrible journey and great adventures, and he journeyed in the world of the wall. And he had a friend, Tom thought, and he had an idea it was a girl. The shadow warrior had a friend, but he remembered no more about her. These low, uneven hills, so suggestive in the world of the wall with its dusky golden sky, they were enticing, and always, always he had wanted so much to go there himself. So he had made up the stories, and he knew that beyond the dusty wheat field of the golden light in the foreground, beyond the desert of the brick wall, behind the old plaster, behind the wallpaper, the uneven wall gave the light its uneven grain, and so built for him this gritty world in which his adventures were played out. As if the firelight on that wall revealed a light, as if it was lit by a distant star, as if it would worlds away across the galaxy. And the shadow warrior, the hero, he had a quest, and the quest was that he should get to the sea that lay beyond those enticing, low shadow hills. And Tom knew there were dangers in the shadow world, and it was peopled, the world of the wall, and he knew that his friend, the shadow warrior, had a long way to go. But Tom knew that he had reached the sea. One day the shadow warrior had made it across those hills, under the deep golden sky, and there was the sea. But as everything seen in that world, it was different. It was otherwise. For the sea there was filled with ice, and it was noisy. It made a sound like diamonds being formed. It grated. It was a cacophony of noise, as if you could hear the shifting of continental plates, and the sea was not water. It was like glass, but beautiful in its way, and those slowly glacial waves came crashing like fallen ice stars to the shore, like waterfalls of ice, and as if the spray of that sea was like crystals, and did not evaporate, but lay in splendour on the shadow shore. He remembered telling someone about it, but who he could not remember. That was it, he thought. There had sometimes been someone else there, and one day they had asked him where the shadow people went when the light was out, when the fire was out, and he had said, "They come here, of course." He was amazed at the child he had been, so wide-ranging in imagination, without bounds, and he wondered again how he could possibly have forgotten all of it, and how he had become the Tom that had studied so hard, because that child, that Tom, could never have studied. He had far too many important things on his mind. Stickmen, thin and tall, he knew the shadow people had stood, like those hunters in the cave paintings he had seen, like runners, tall and featureless, and he remembered how his shadow friend would wave to him and then turn, and always he knew when that featureless face had turned to regard him, and when it looked inward towards the world of the wall. Just then he heard a noise outside his door, and then he heard a gentle tapping. He looked through to his bedroom. The light was off, and the only light in there came from the watered-down candlelight that escaped from the kitchen, and on the ceiling, because the man downstairs had his light on, and his curtains open, and it would always reflect from the opposite wall and up into Tom's bedroom. He stood up. Who could that be? And did he want to know? It was late. He had been wool-gathering, as he did, a long time, and surely no one would be calling this time of night when he so rarely had visitors. Perhaps it's someone from one of the other rooms, he thought, come to boil a cup of sugar. Because he had not heard the door downstairs, he had not been listening. But it was the kind of thing he registered even without knowing he had heard the bell. Here it was again, the gentle tapping. I suppose I have to go, he thought. They are not going away. Walking into the bedroom, he did not turn on the light, and he took off his coat. He thought, I could make them think I was asleep, and perhaps they will go away. He had his hand on the lock, and he turned it and opened the door. Outside there was a man he had never seen before. The landlord's light was dim, and he could not see the visitor well. A shadow man, a silhouette against the hallway. He was short. Okay. He was short, but his outline bulked, suggestive of weatherproof coat, pockets, and journeys, filled like an inked image which suggested strength and vitality. And Tom said, "Yes." "Tom Frost," said the voice from the unseen mouth. And Tom said, "Yes." And the man said, "I am Lloyd Kelly. Professor Silverstone told me to come to see you." It was extraordinary, and Tom thought, I should slam the door on him and make him go away, because what makes him think I should let him in like this, when I know nothing of him? But he heard within the man's voice, the voice that whispered in so hurried an undertone, as if all must be kept secret, the trembling of fatigue, and he opened his door wide, thinking, well, he seems tired, so if he tried to steal from me, or was dangerous, perhaps it would be easy to deal with him. He turned on the light in the bedroom, and he closed the door to the hall. The man was well dressed. His clothes, when new, had not been of the cheapest, and he carried with him a suitcase and a carrier bag. He had wild, short, indomitable hair, and he moved decisively, but he clearly was exhausted. He was pale, and he looked almost spent. Tom immediately felt guilty. "Come in," he said, and led him through to the kitchen, where the candle wavered and guttered, holding, as if thin smoky arms in the air, as if it was as shocked as Tom, as if it shook tiny febrile fists in the air and said, "No, no, don't let him in." He told Lloyd to sit down, and Lloyd collapsed into the nearest armchair, and he said, could we please have the light on?" Tom saw then that he was not only exhausted, his eyes were wide, as if he had seen so much that was so far beyond his knowledge, so far out of his experience, he could not make them wide enough to be able to take it all in, and to understand what he had seen. Tom felt more guilt for holding the man at the door, for so peremptorily asking, "Yes?" He said, "Sure," and he turned on the light, and the man sat there, blinking as if the light was far too bright, as if he had been in the dark for a long time. As he filled the kettle, Tom said, "Silverstone did not tell me you were coming," and then he wished he had put it better, because it sounded like an accusation. "No," said Lloyd, "we thought it better not." He had an accent, a lilt, and he stretched his arm, which had been carrying the suitcase, and he said, "I'm sorry, I realise this is out of order, but we had no other plan and nowhere else I can go." There was a sound at the window. The wind, which had been so still all night, was now beginning to rise, and Tom saw that Lloyd looked that way with a rapid turn of the head, and again his eyes were wide. "Nothing," said Tom, "just the wind," and Lloyd nodded and rubbed his forehead, in just the way Tom had seen Silverstone pass his hand over his weary face, as if he had been too long with that face, with those hands, and now wished he might, just for a while, be someone else, someone whose life was less extreme, less difficult. "How is Silverstone?" said Tom, and he thought how trite, as if they had met at some wine-glass social occasion, and he wished he knew what to say to his visitor. But Lloyd said, "He's fine. When did you last hear from him?" As if he was taking the cue. "This is ordinary, nothing out of the way here." And Tom said, "He called me a couple of weeks ago about some books I had lent him. He was fine." Because Silverstone had sounded in much better spirits, and had been extremely friendly and forthcoming, saying he would like to get down and see Tom's paintings properly, and had arranged that he would come Wednesday next week. Lloyd drained his cup of coffee, and Tom gave him another, and he turned from the kettle to say something to Lloyd, and found him half asleep, his half-drunk second cup dangling in his hand. Tom took the cup away from him, and he noticed how unresistingly Lloyd permitted the cup to be so taken, and he saw that Lloyd's head had fallen to the side, and he was breathing deeply. But already his eyes moved under the closed lids, and his mouth moved, as if he dreamed, and as if his dreams were uncomfortable and startling and not happy. He went into his bedroom, and he found one of his extra winter blankets, and he put it over Lloyd, and then sat on his bed, feeling very put out. "I suppose I'd better make the best of it," he thought. "It's odd, but since Shawley, the people I mean to really talk to, seem to want to talk about something dreadful, something tragic and frightening," he thought. He began to wonder if it was just him, or if everybody was like that, as if the whole world had gone crazy on him, and he had not been clued up enough to notice. He wished he felt more equipped for it, because, with all the best will in the world, he had no idea what to say to these people, no idea how they could be comforted, no idea how they could be sustained and made to feel better. "And it's weird how still I am alone and live on the knife edge of poverty," he thought rather grumpily. "Whenever it looks like I might be shoved out on the street and my life has fallen apart, where are they then?" But he felt sorry, because, in fact, when he had last spoken to Silverstone, Silverstone had asked him fulsomely how he did, and Tom had felt, though Silverstone had not said as much, this time it was different. This time they were, whether Tom wanted it or not, friends, and if the roof came in again, he might be able to ask Silverstone for assistance, a room for a few days, perhaps a loan to tide him over. Poverty, he thought, gives one that prescience. You know who you can ask and who you cannot ask. Adrift in a sea of other people's distress, he felt like a lifeboat that had been launched without equipment or sail. He felt as if the storms were there all around him, and there were the flares, the distress signals, but he had no idea even of his own way into harbour, and no way to find the crews in difficulty. The little ships and the clouds were everywhere, and some nasty weather brewing. Leave it there.